Are you an adventurer looking to take your hunt to the next level? Then you're in the right place. Welcome to East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik.
Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of the East Meets West Hunt podcast presented by Spartan Forge. On today's episode, I am joined by Fieldcraft Survival's Mobility and Motorsports Director, Mike Hernandez. Mike built some badass overland Jeeps, built to take him anywhere that he wants to go. He talks about why vehicle preparedness is so important, your vehicle loadout, recovery, communication and navigation, camping, the key things you should have in your vehicle for hunting, and much more. On today's Mountain Buck Monday story of the week, this one comes from Elijah Stantz out of West Virginia. And I have to say up front, this is probably one of the most entertaining mountain buck stories that I've received to this point. So I'm looking forward to reading this one to you guys. But if you do want to check out the photo of this deer and what Elijah killed, you can head over to East Meets West Hunt on Instagram and East Meets West Outdoors on Facebook. Give them a follow there and check out all the posts. So Elijah wrote, "It was the day before Thanksgiving in 2016, and I was contacted about a piece of property for lease to hunt. I was able to get the lease to hunt and scout a few hours before sunset. I located a ridge top with heavy, thick cover on one side and a clear cut on the other side with a tree stand half rotten, but I decided I'd give it the opportunity with the amount of sign in that area. It was the morning of the 24th, and I was dealing with a stomach virus, so bathroom breaks were essential at the time. Fast forward to 10 a.m., and no movement, no sign, and I'm hurting. I can only hold on so much longer, and dinner is so close to being done. I decided I have one more hour before I'm heading out. 20 minutes later, and I couldn't hold it, and off the side of the stand I went, sweat beads just a-rolling. Not even 10 minutes later, a 3-year-old walks 20 yards from the north side of the stand, and I take the perfect shot while filming." I love this story. It's such an awesome buck that Elijah shot, and it's just funny. I think just about any of us have been in one of these situations one time or another. So I appreciate Elijah sharing this story with us. And I'd love to hear your mountain buck story. Please, if you would, send them through email. Just go to eastmeetswesthunt.com, fill out the contact us form there. Send it in that way. I'm getting them through whole bunch of different places like Facebook. I rarely check the messages there because it's so awkward to see whether it comes from my personal page or East Meets West Hunt, and it puts it in this. Anyways, don't send them there. Instagram works too, but the quickest way for me to be able to get it is through email. So send it over there. I'd love to share your stories. I did want to mention that recently I released a new hat on the East Meets West website called the Predator Performance Hat. And I wanted to talk about this because I wore it while I was scouting the last weekend there, and had it on my Instagram stories, and I got some messages about it, and a few people bought it right then when it was out, and I realized I don't think I ever shared anything about it. But what's cool about it, it's unstructured crown, it's fully curved visor, it's open strap closure on the back, it's pretty low profile hat. It's really lightweight polyester. It's built by Legacy, so if you're familiar with Legacy's classic fits, and then it has the EMW flag patch on the front of it. And it's really best worn when either the temperatures are high or your exertion level is high, because it's built to wick moisture and keep you cool on any of your long hikes or early season hunts, turkey hunts, things like that. And I also do donate 3% of the proceeds from this product and any of the other apparel items on the website to the conservation organization of the quarter. And this quarter, I've chosen the Sportsman's Alliance, and then that'll change to the National Wild Turkey Federation here in a couple days in quarter two. So I like to to switch it up and donate to these. I've been doing this from day one in 2018. Been paying out no matter, it depends on how many orders I get, but always donating to these conservation organizations because it's super important to be able to support them and make sure that we keep hunting alive and well. So if you would check that out, and would really appreciate it. With that being said, we got snow again here in Pennsylvania. Every single weekend we seem to be getting snow, but I did get to go out and scout some big wood swamp areas, just flatter terrain, not really much elevation at all. I've always struggled with these areas in the past, but I do like them. There's some big deer that I've found living in these types of areas. But outside of the rut, I haven't necessarily figured them out completely, but I love the beaver ponds, scouted some beaver ponds out, and I've hunted a similar area within probably 5 or 6 miles of this particular location before, and it's one of the only spots that have killed multiple bucks from one tree around one of these beaver ponds. So I love scouting these types of areas. So found some good sign. Didn't pick up any sheds on that day when I was in there, which right now I'm mostly just focused on scouting, but I would have bet just about anything that I would have found sheds in this place with just kind of those swampy openings and grasses and everything in there that I typically after a hard winter find sheds in. But whether someone else already was in there and found them or I just didn't find them. Either way, it was a good scouting trip, and just preparing for the mountain buck scouting camp here in a couple of weeks. It's coming quickly, but getting ready for that. So I guess with that being said, let's just jump into this episode with Mike Hernandez. All right, we're live. Mike Hernandez, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me, man. Appreciate it.
Yeah, I'm excited to get to talk to you here. I've been following along with your stuff on YouTube and on Instagram for quite a while and everything through Fieldcraft Survival, and it's been really cool from my standpoint. I love what you guys are doing. I love the planning phases when it comes to hunting and trips and camping and all that different stuff. So like it really fit, and I've been just kind of like watching from afar what you guys have been doing and really enjoy it.
Awesome, man. Well, we appreciate the support. Seriously.
Yeah. So how about you start off by just giving a little bit of a background on yourself and who you are, what you do.
Absolutely. So for the last 4 years, going on 5, I've been involved with a company called Fieldcraft Survival. The company was founded by a good friend of mine, Mike Glover, who is a 20-year Special Forces veteran, CIA, just very, very, for lack of a better word, top tier. Well, actually, that is the way they describe it, right? Top tier.
Yeah.
Top tier operator. And I remember, finding him the exact same way we found each other, on social media. And right around that time frame 5 years ago, my daughter was, she was just turning 5, and I was already on this journey of, I need to be more prepared. I have this family, I have a professional life in behavioral health. And, I didn't grow up with this like preparedness centeredness that we have now. Right. And I remember when I found Glover online, I was like, dude, this guy's legit. And I made a point to, when he came down to Arizona where I live, to take one of his courses. And it was a combat, it was fighting carbine, I believe is what it was. And it just totally changed my life. At the time I was heavily involved with the Jeep community, like you've seen online. And when I met Mike that day, he's like, dude, we need to talk. I have this idea to combine these preparedness things. I have some things I want to, kind of bounce off you in terms of ideas. And I mean, that's all she wrote. I mean, after that, we spent the last 5 years just doing it, right?
Yeah. So do you still work full time in the health services space?
So this is what we're in March. So this year is technically my first complete year working full time for Fieldcraft.
Okay.
So my last client in behavioral health was November. And I still have a professional license that I have open, but I haven't taken any clients or any other cases since then. So yes, I'm still active and my license is still active, but I haven't, because of Fieldcraft, gone back to that yet. So which was the goal, by the way, is to do this full time.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. So explain your title here, because I love hearing it, because I don't think there's another title that's similar anywhere.
There isn't, man. I mean, I am the Fieldcraft Survival Mobility Director, right? Mobility and Motorsports Director. And it's very interesting, because everyone that I say that to that, has any kind of interest in is like, what does that mean? And I'm like, dude, I still can't believe I get to do this for a living. But essentially what I do is I operate the vehicle side of preparedness for Fieldcraft Survival. There is some training that we do. We do a pretty cool high-end course called the Mobility Experience, where you come in, we talk about mobility principles, but it's also in conjunction with survival, medical, firearms training. Security above anything else is the most important. But you get to break bread with us and Glover. We use night vision at night. We set up obstacles, and then at the very end, you have this big challenge. So that's part of the training aspect of it. But there's also a huge marketing aspect of it, which is what you see a lot of on Instagram and YouTube, right? So essentially, I get to just live the life, travel around, build cool stuff, and then just relay, this is some of the principles of preparedness as it pertains to vehicles. So that real short answer, yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. That sounds like such a cool job, and like to be able to do that, like it's something you're passionate about and love to do. And like you said, you've been involved in the Jeep community for a while. And as I was doing some research on you and stuff, and like seeing like popping up in these forums and stuff back in the day, and like it's pretty cool. So it's like really a dream come true to.
I don't think I'll ever get used to it. I don't think I'll ever get used to it, man. It's just like, wow, this is what I'm doing. Hell yeah.
Yeah. No, I think it's really cool about what you guys are doing with like these courses and these experiences and things. And that's like, it's been a lot of the motivating standpoint. Like I'm having my first like what I'm calling a mountain buck scouting camp, and I'm having this experience where I have people coming in and teaching them the principles of scouting whitetails in the Appalachian Mountains, and then getting out there and actually doing it. And I have other experts in the field that are in there to be able to talk with and have that like just in-person experience that's like, so when that has been a lot of being able to kind of watch what you guys are doing has been a lot of the motivating factors on what I've been wanting to do, and finally kind of made the jump into trying to do that. So that's really cool.
Hunting is a perfect example. I'm still relatively new to hunting, and these are some of the things that I was like, well, I know how to go out off-road, but how does it change through hunting? And they're essentially identical, though. That's what's so cool about it, because I've had like 5 or 6 trips that I've done now, but 100%, man. I when I first started, it was the exact same situation that you're talking about.
So you just got into hunting recently, then?
Relatively within the last, I want to say 8 years. And really that's only because of the public land hunt draws, right? It's super difficult. I've honestly been on this like 2-year drought where I can't draw any tags. But I have had 3 successful hunts. One of them was a deer hunt here in Arizona, and then 2 cow out tags that I was able to fill. But bro, if I could get drawn, like
you live in a bad state, like a really bad, like an amazing state as far as the standpoint of like the quality of hunting is incredible, but as far as getting tags, like that's like my once in a lifetime plan is Arizona. Like I buy points and I apply every year, but it's like if I can get that one time, that's that's it.
100%.
Yeah. So that's really funny. And so how did you, and this is a little bit off track, but how did you kind of get into that? I'm just curious. How did you get into hunting or wanting to do it?
You know what it was, man? And like I use my daughter as an example because, in behavioral health, I'm also licensed like a foster parent. And one of the things that I was and am a really big proponent supporter on is, being active in the community, right? And I started to volunteer at a young age and serve the community within behavioral health and with kids and homeless shelters and stuff like that. And never really, like the lights never really went on that I need to be self-sufficient, right? We in the United States are so blessed that we have lost touch with very basic skills, right? And one of the things that happened to me, and getting back to my daughter full circle, is when she was born, I was like, holy crap, I have everything to lose now because I don't know how to do this. I don't know how to procure water. I don't know how to, if the grid goes down, I'm screwed, man. Or if whatever happens, natural disasters, there was one course that I taught, bro, where literally that day there was 2 hurricanes in the Gulf of Mexico. California was on fire, and there was these huge, massive riots all through, the western portions of the United States, civil unrest. And when you sit back and look at those things, the question has to be asked is, what do I do? How do I protect my family? So for me, that's how I got into it. It was my baby girl when I first had her, and the rest was history.
Interesting. I love that, and it's cool to hear everyone's kind of story that didn't grow up with it. Like me, I just didn't have a choice. That's just what it was,
Right.
So like it's which I'm very lucky to be able to have that because it's not simple to not never have hunted before or not have like the mentors to be able to do that to try to get into it. So I'm sure that's been a challenging process for you.
Absolutely 100% agree.
Yeah, but I'm sure now too though with Fieldcraft Survival you probably have some pretty good contacts and people that have been able to help you out through that process.
Absolutely, man. We got some new things brewing too. I can't say too much, but Eastman's Journal is actually becoming a bigger part of our network. And some of the stuff we have on the table, I'm like, oh my God, let's go.
Yeah.
Please teach me.
Oh, that's really awesome. Yeah, the Eastman's that's as top level as you can get from that standpoint. So, yeah, I've done podcasts with Ike and Guy and Scott Reekers and those guys. I was actually just on the phone with Scott before I was talking to you here, but it's that's awesome. But anyway, so back on track a little bit here. It all kind of goes into this whole idea of preparedness, and like with you on the vehicle side, what I see is like when one of the biggest things that I've noticed, especially coming from, I'm living in Pennsylvania and I'm traveling out west, or even hunting around, even hunting within 30 minutes from my house. Like there's so many things that can go wrong, and like when I'm just like a planner by nature, and like my profession is in health and safety, and which has to do with, so I'm always used to like the planning aspect of it and what can go wrong and trying to figure out solutions to these problems. So like the vehicle side of it, was something, as simple as, I could get a flat tire and I'm out in the mountains and I have no cell service. I have no way of communication. I have, there's no gas stations for 80 miles on these roads, and I'm low on fuel. Like all these things like start coming into your head. Like the first trip I went out west, I had no spare tire. I had it was a mess. I had 35-inch tires on my truck and no spare tire, and like in all these different things. And I'm like, all right, like I need to start thinking about this, better, because if something happens, then I'm, shit out of luck. And
100%.
I need to figure this out. So I'd like to hear your thoughts on that.
No, yeah. So I love that you say that, because quite literally, there's 3 things, well, mainly 2 things that you are more than likely to encounter within your vehicle. And top one is a tire failure, whether it's a puncture, blowout, whatever that looks like, or low tire pressure, just because the temperature dropped or whatever that looks like. Tires, and the next one is batteries, right? When you look at the statistics, most of us, and it was like Cooper Tire, they did a survey, and they found that on average, we as just regular people spend 18 to 22 days within our vehicles on like commuting, family stuff, in 365 days, that's almost a month, right? So on average in a year, you're spending about that time in your vehicle. A lot of people don't realize that, because it's just, like I said, we're so blessed. We just get up, we grind Monday to Friday typically, and it's just kind of out of sight, out of mind. What happens if you're in a situation like that with no cell service, or your battery dies, or you just, AAA can't come? Well, you should have the skills to be able to manage that, especially if you're hunting, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, there's a lot of that going on. I'll give you an example. I was just in Salem, Missouri for the rally races for Mike Glover's first of 7 races we're doing this year, right? And a lot of people are like, what's Fieldcraft Survival doing in motorsports? And I was like, well, I'll tell you, because motorsports and preparedness have the same crossover that hunting does in that sense. You're in a vehicle. We're going to spend, like I just said, 18 to 22 days out of the year in our vehicles. You need a vehicle to get to wherever you're hunting. And then what do you do in terms of contingencies? Well, for us, when we were going through, because we rented 3 vehicles and we brought our Sprinter van, me being the vehicle guy, one of the first things I do is I come through the checklist and I always say, hey, batteries and tires are always what we're looking at. You can't really test a battery unless you have a machine or a meter, but you can always look at tires, put your hands on them, go. The very first vehicle that one of our girls picked didn't have a spare tire either. And I shit you not, the following day, the car that she was in, they blew out a tire and needed that spare, the little donut that was in the new one that we got. So when we got there, I was like, don't get that one. Doesn't have a spare.
Yeah.
Tires are the first thing. Dude, and straight up, literally I got it on video too. I'm going to post it here soon. Because it's just a fact of life. Like, that's the way it is, dude. You know? So let's be prepared.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. And I think it's pretty self-explanatory on why it's important, you know, from that standpoint. Although I think it needs to be reminded regularly, because it's like one of those things, like you can do it a million times and nothing goes wrong, and then there's that one time and you don't forget about it because it's, you know, it can be serious or whatever, and that's where I think just like the trying to consciously get it into people's minds and putting together these checklists or whatever when you're going on a trip to make sure that you're on board with that. So
absolutely.
I know you were talking, you mentioned it earlier about mobility principles. So do you want to kind of explain what that means?
Absolutely. So within mobility, one of the things that we really like to focus on is like entry level things. You know, when people see my Gladiator, a lot of times, you know, I'll get this comment of, well, I don't need anything like that. And I'm the first to say 100%. You don't need a Gladiator on 40s and 1 tons. And, no. That's recreation, right? But some of the principles that we do are like, you know, loadout, right? Recovery. I'm writing an article right now for another magazine on just emergency preparedness, right? And when you start to build up your vehicle, the base or the foundation of anything that we like to teach is 4-wheel drive. So from there you go and you start adding pieces, you know, to the puzzle, but it doesn't have to be something outrageous. You know, a lot of that is marketing too. And I'm always, you know, upfront with that. I mean, it's eye catching. Dude, I just wrapped the whole thing in multicam black, right? Like you don't, you don't need to do that.
But it looks sick.
Right. So what I'll do is, you know, if you come to the course, we introduce ourselves, we give our backgrounds. I have all my guys there, you know, Kevin Estelle is there, Glover's there. It's either going to be, so we have a couple medics. One of them is Doc Jones, Nate, he'll be there. And one of the first things we do is I have a checklist, and I just call it a pre-flight checklist. And what I'm doing with that checklist is, one, make sure the vehicle's good to go on our excursion, but I'm also kind of gauging everyone's skill level, right? And there's some real basic things you can do with maintenance is another one in regard to your basic principles that will help you tackle anything, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that totally makes sense. And you know, and I think that's where when I think of like overlanding, or I think like that type of community, you think of like these very outrageous, you know, vehicles that everybody wants, but they're like, man, I can't afford that, or isn't practical for me, you know. So like being able to break down those basic, you know, type things. And so like for you, I guess, you know, kind of transitioning here a little bit, when you talked about loadout, like, so basically what you mean by that is like what you should keep in your vehicle. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So explain a little bit of either the principles or some of the things that make sense from that standpoint.
So within survival, in broad strokes, there's typically 6 things that you need to focus on in order to sustain life. The cool thing about vehicles, right, is it's an extension of your rucksack, as one of the key examples that we give. That's a military reference. So typically when you're in the military and you're going through survival school, or even learning how to sustain life, you know, that little 30-pound rack or ruck or 60 pounds or however big, it's going to be everything that you need. The best part about a vehicle is the entire rig can sustain that for whatever amount of time, right? So it makes it a lot more comfortable, man.
Yeah.
So when we get into principles and we get into loadouts change just basically on the amount of time you're going to spend as a foundation. And then after that, there's atmospherics. So if you're looking at principles of survival, you have food, water, shelter, comms, med or hygiene, security, and then we'll throw in like recovery, because that's pretty common.
Yeah.
For those situations. So those very basic things, if you're looking for something or a way to organize it, focus on those and then make it your own, right? For me, I have a pretty extensive setup, but the loadout is different for me because I support a large group or a class, right? I'll give you an example. Onboard air, most people don't have on a daily driver, but for those of us who are off-roading or rock crawlers, that's very common. And you can do that one of two ways, right? You can do a CO2 bottle or an onboard air compressor. I have both because I support everybody, right?
Yeah, you're that guy. You're the guy that
I'm that guy.
You're the friend that everybody wants to go with because he's always got everything, right? To help them out when they forget things, right?
Dude, and I'm here for it, right? I love it. So that's what your loadout will consist of. It changes, If people are asking, I just got a new, let's say, Tacoma, it's 4-wheel drive, it's bone stock. What are the things I need? Your loadout in the beginning is very simple, right? Medical equipment, get one of our med kits from Fieldcraft Survival. Make sure you have some recovery equipment and get a fire extinguisher, and that's a really nice basic starting point for you.
Yeah, and what would you say about like accessibility of these items and how that makes sense? I know for me a lot of times where I've been trying to get better is I would have a whole bunch of stuff, but I wouldn't know where it was. Like I've had it in there for so long or whatever. Like how do you know what that is? I know like so I just had a guy on recently talking about first aid kits and emergency preparedness from that standpoint, just for hunting specifically. And we were talking about like, that's why you don't have one for everything, because like, he's like, if you have the one from your hunting pack, you throw it in your truck and then you forget to throw it back in your hunting pack. And there's like this. So I guess that made me think of, for what you said, like accessibility and knowing where things are at and where certain things, maybe some things are important enough that they need to be right in the cab of your truck in arm's reach quickly, or something can be, it's fine. All right. It's in the back, it's in the bed of the truck, it's in the trunk, whatever that might be.
Right. So in order of priority, let's address med. What's really cool about the last 5 years is that original conversation when I talked with Mike about, let's say, med or the way we're doing Stop the Bleed, which isn't advanced. It's just a very basic principle, of you see lots of red liquid, which is your blood coming out profusely in an exaggerated manner. Then you need to stop that because you're going to die in the next, 3 to 5 minutes. So how do you do that in a vehicle? Well, and I'll reference racing, right? I was fortunate enough to run as a co-driver in King of the Hammers. And one of the things that we see in racing is long limb injuries, okay? So you're going at speed, you flail or you flip. Well, your arms, if you're not strapped in or good at holding it, and sometimes it's just natural reaction or the force is too great, your arms come out of a window and what happens? Whammo, you take a long limb injury, right? It's also the same in like crushing injuries. So what you need to focus on when it comes to your med kits is, one, it needs to be able to handle bumps and bruises, burns, because that's also a possibility in your vehicle. But it needs to be able to manage trauma, and not just for you, for everybody you're going to have in your family. So after you've established that kit, which we partnered with, I think their name is TACMed now, and those guys are all paramedics. They're all way more medical knowledge than me, and they've compiled all that stuff. And we basically private label it for them, right? It's got our Fieldcraft Survival sticker on it. Those things you can search, and it's already done by guys who know and have experienced that stuff and trained to that standard. Those kits need to be in an area at arm's length, right? So we make a couple of products. One of them is a visor panel that's got some really strong Velcro, and you can just reach up either your passenger or driver side, pull those off, and it has everything you need in it. Yeah. A tourniquet's always a good idea for your long limbs, for everybody in the vehicle. But we also make a really cool product. It's our mobility bag that is a backpack, like a rucksack, but it opens up and it can mount to either the front of your seat or the back. So again, arm's length. I can reach over in my truck, snatch it off, and then we're real quick and ready to go. What's cool about those products is we tested them in my first professional race last year in King of the Hammers. We beat the tar out of them for like 14 hours, and they did excellent. And then Mike just ran his first race in Salem, Missouri. Same thing, set it up on there. And if they can withstand racing like that,
Yeah.
they can withstand daily driving, right?
Yeah.
So priority on that, dude. You have to be able to grab them. One of the things I am working on, because I'm also in like the motorcycle side, the moto side, is I'm working on a bag right now that will be able to. There's a lot of bags that you can grab, like say your firearms from them quickly. Even when you're hunting, you can swing them over, open a flap, and then out comes your firearm. But like if you're in a motorcycle situation and you have an accident, you're more than likely going to be separated from your bike, right?
Yeah.
Which is different from a vehicle. So that needs to be on your person, right? So that's another thing to consider when you're setting up your medical is, your everyday carry, your mobility, and then it extends also to your homestead, which is your home. In terms of fires, dude, I don't know what the heck happened, but last summer I had 3 fires I responded to. Never in my life had a fire, but 3 of them all last summer. And one of them was a trailer. The brakes locked up, melted the brakes, and then got over to the wooden section of the boat. It was a boat trailer and set the whole thing on fire, dude. So that needs to be hard. Yeah, it's crazy.
Jeez.
So those need to be hard mounted in a ready access location. I have a little, like a molly panel in the rear door of my truck. So what I was able to do is run around, get out, quick pin, pull that out, and then hit the fire where I needed it. So those 2 are top priority for like easy access. Recovery, although you can get stuck and maybe there is an instance where it's a little bit more difficult or there's an injury involved, you really don't have to get those things like immediately like you would like if you had a bleed or a fire per se, right? So that's the priority on those.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And that's like for me, I've always kept like my, so up until this point, I've run a deck system in the back of my truck, and the one whole side I kept to like recovery equipment, and I had that stuff in there. Now I'm switching things up. I'm getting rid of, I like changing things, but I'm getting rid of my topper and pulling the deck system out, and I'm putting a Diamondback cover on and figuring out how to mount my tent to that and working through it. But I've always kept that stuff kind of out of the way, because it's like, even if you're in a tough situation, typically you can get to that. It's not a real life or death type of scenario. Absolutely. I guess from the recovery standpoint, while we're on that, what are some of the things that you would think that someone going on a hunting trip, or really, I mean, again, similar to what you're doing on maybe a little bit of a lesser scale, what do you think that you should have for a recovery standpoint?
So all vehicles come with a jack and some kind of like crowbar or method of removing lugs, right? I can't tell you, dude, how many people I've talked to when we're having this conversation, and the very next thing that I ask them is, do you know where yours is at? And they look at me like, oh.
Yep.
I mean, that's priority. Like I said, if you're going to be experiencing tire things, which again, the statistics are there, you need to know where that's at. So first and foremost, a jack or a high lift jack, right, will give you a ton of more options. You can even use it as a winch if you don't have one, or a come along winch if you don't have it, as a staple. So there's like 4 things that you should look into when it comes to recovery. A winch is always a very useful tool, although they are expensive, and you don't really need those to, let's say, commute. But if you're going to be hunting or extending your range or going solo, I mean, that piece of equipment is paramount, dude. So get a worn winch, right? The best in the industry. I really like what's it called? Synthetic winches, because it eliminates some of the risk. Synthetic lines don't store energy the way that the steel lines will. There is some maintenance, but that's just kind of my recommendation. Then you need things like tow ropes, right? A tow strap, which is different from, let's say, a dynamic rope, which will give 40% stretching capability to you, right? So the difference between those two is you get a running start at the dynamic. It stretches, magnifies the load, and then gets you out. Whereas the other tow strap, you just pull it slightly tight and then move, someone out of a space where you can't.
Okay. I've never seen the dynamic ones before.
Bro, I use that thing all the time. If you check out our YouTube page on Fieldcraft Survival, I want to say like 3 years ago, one of Mike's buddies, Lee Busby, who's this super top tier guy, it had a Gladiator brand spanking new, and he actually got swept away by we have flash floods here in Arizona, and he crossed this little area that wasn't that bad when he was there originally, and then within minutes, I mean, it just started rushing. So his Gladiator got across the front section, which is got the motor in it, which is nice and weighted, and his bed didn't have anything in it. So when he crossed over, got his front wheels on land, it swept the rear and took him 100 yards down this like 3 to 4 foot wash. I mean, dude, we got video of it. You got to see it.
Oh,
And we recovered him, which was crazy as it is, just to get them out. And then we came back 3 days later when the water was low. But that's the only way I could get him out. You can see in the video, we're kind of moving, I didn't have a winch on my truck at the time. And that's what's also cool about a dynamic pro. You just put it in a bag or something like in your truck. And then again, make sure there's nothing that's going to rip up the bottom of both vehicles. And you get that little bit of pull, and it magnifies the pulling force and the working load limits. And dude, it just got him right out.
That's awesome. And so I was going to ask you about the winch standpoint, because that's something that like I feel like what do you think about the options of like, say, the ones that you can put on like to a front hitch or something, so you don't have to have it all the time, or you don't have to buy a bumper? Yes. What are your thoughts on those?
Absolutely. That's such a good option, especially like, let's say if you have multiple rigs, or your budget doesn't allow just to have that thing nestled up front. Absolutely. That's such a good way. You just pin it, move it front and back, and it can go with you on any of your other vehicles. Absolutely. I agree with that.
Yeah. And then you would need a separate battery if you were to run it as far as on the back, to be able to do that, or how would that work?
Yeah. So I've seen those come with like, either longer, 12-volt connections. I don't think they run. Some of them might run like an alligator clip. I don't remember. That might not be the way you do that, because you are going straight to your battery. But yeah, in the rear, you would either need the longer line or a rear battery. Sometimes people do that too.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was wondering. And the Warren winch comment is funny, because that's something growing up. Like, I remember my grandpa always telling me, and he had like a Jeep with one on, and like his four-wheeler, he's like, always get a Warren winch. It's just
always
don't cheap out on buy a Warren winch. And that's when I had a side-by-side, I put a Warren on there with synthetic, and I like the synthetic a lot better than the cables. It just seemed to stay nice longer, and just like work better, not kink up, and have all these things.
Well, and that's I'm glad you said that too, because even though we teach survival, the method that we do that is recreation. So I'm trying to mitigate all kinds of risks. I'm trying to be out there having a good time.
Yeah.
I don't want my little ones running around, and I'm worried that something's going to happen. So I'm with you on the synthetic line, dude. It mitigates that just enough for me, so I can go crawling in my Wrangler or my truck, or overland, or just even camping. So 100% agree.
And I like what you said. So so what I've done up to this point was, and I'm going to talk on the situation of my truck, because I'm also like kind of asking for advice, as I am with for other people to learn. But like, so I have a high lift jack in there, and then there was like an additional kit that I bought to turn it into like a come along, and bought a chain with it to be able to do that. It's kind of like, all right, this is my first step option for recovery if I'm in a bind. Obviously there's limitations to that versus having a winch, but that's kind of like my first step into it. And the high lift jacks aren't that expensive to be able to get. I think all in I was like $130 into everything for that peace of mind and being able to have that.
Absolutely. And it's a foundational piece, like we said. In terms of the 4, that's definitely one of the ones. I mean, we could even do a whole block of instruction just on high lift jacks and how they're used. And like you said, like a winch or a come along, or there's accessories that'll, strap even to the wheel of your vehicle to lift it up. I've used them even, I had to change a tire one time here at the house, and everything was closed. And the next morning we're supposed to go out, and I've even used them to like break the beads of tires on wheels, with the weight of the vehicle. So I can put the tire underneath, sandwich it in between the truck, jack it up, and the force just pulls the bead off the wheel. I mean, there's just a million things you can do with them.
Yeah, that's crazy that you're able to do all that different stuff with it. And that's what's helpful. I guess this is just a sidebar, and I'm sure you'll agree with this, but like, understanding how to utilize that equipment is a whole nother game. Like that's what it comes into hunting, and something that's been beaten to my head over the years. And as I'm talking to people that might be newer to not even just going out west, just hunting in general, but like understanding like how to do things, basically I'd say like with your eyes closed, like that like the back of your hand, that you can utilize that equipment.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So, after like kind of moving from the recovery standpoint, I know we could spend all day on these things, but
Yeah.
the other thing is a lot of times where you're going, and same for you or same for hunters, is most of the time you're going to places that don't have cell communication, don't have service to be able to do that. So there's a couple things that I see as importance is being able in an emergency situation to be able to call somebody or be able to get a hold of somebody, I guess. And then also the navigation standpoint with being able to know where you're at, if you
Absolutely.
don't have a cell signal. So I want to hear your thoughts on that.
So I guess I'm going to admit some things here about myself. I'm actually terrible. I have a terrible sense of direction. I I get lost in the city all the time, but I'm usually pretty good about being off road because I like to use terrain features to navigate. Right, understand east and west in terms of the sunrise and sunset. You know what I mean? Understand those things, but also understand your technology. I've been very fortunate to run apps like Basemap and Onyx Off Road as trials, and what you can do with those tech pieces, you can download the actual area that you're going to be at, so it won't rely on connection. It'll just need to ping to the GPS satellite, every once in a while, and it will be able to guide you in and out. If you don't do that, then it won't be able to actively generate, the map that you're in.
Yeah.
The other thing that I like to use too, on my truck, I have the factory navigation, I have an iPad, and then I also have my iPhone up, heads up, and they all, communicate and move around. And there's been a couple of instances where, the phone and the iPad weren't grabbing signal the right way, and it was giving me erroneous stuff. Typically, your vehicle navs, if you're able to get that as an option, will have just a little bit more power because, like I said, the vehicle extends your range, but also the signal strength of what you're doing. So in terms of navigation, I love that stuff. Garmin has a bunch of really great options. I'm sure you've seen a lot of those
Yeah.
with beacons and even some SOS calls where you hit it and then everybody comes and they
Yeah.
send National Grid.
Yeah, so I actually have I have a couple of the Garmin products. So, like I use the Inreach Mini on hunts because it weighs like 4 ounces, and I
Yes.
can text from it from anywhere in the world. I can hit the SOS button, and it's a $30,000 call, and the helicopters come in. It's like this big big deal. But yeah, and so I have that, and then I'm actually getting a unit that goes in my truck that's more of the GPS one that you mount on the dash. It's a bigger screen that has navigation and also the InReach technology built into it. And that's just because I geek out on that stuff, and I think
100%.
it's super helpful to be able to have something like that. And then in addition to that, I use the hunting app that I use, the Spartan Forge app. Same thing, you can download the off-road or the offline maps. You're able to do that, and I have this. I can't think of the brand. I went through like a bunch trying to figure out something that actually stuck to your dash to hold your phone up.
Oh, yeah.
But I found one that worked, and it has like a magnet that goes on the back of your phone, and I clip it on there, and I'm able to navigate through there, especially if I'm driving through a hunting area. I can kind of scout as I'm going through, looking to see how the terrain lays out versus what it looks like on the map, and then also be able to go through that. So yeah.
So have you ever had any issues when you download the maps with finding your ways around? I mean, if you lose all signal, does it still work for you? Because I have yet to find the limit of that, but I might not be going far enough out.
Oh no, there's no limit.
Yeah, right?
I mean, I was in Alaska in 2020, and I was dropped off over 100 miles from any civilization, and relied nothing except for that app, and
That's awesome.
and I was able to use it without throw your phone in airplane
So
mode
simple.
and go. Yeah. So it's super helpful, but I always like to have like, a second form of backup on that, in case your phone dies. So, I don't know, anything could happen there. So I like to have
Anything can happen, bro.
a couple different backup, especially on something as important as that. And and I think like the satellite communicators, like the Garmin InReaches and stuff, like for anybody that's going by themselves, especially, that is so important. Whether you're hunting or you're driving somewhere or whatever like that. And I used to like shut my subscription off after hunting season, and now I just lower it to the lowest limit. I pay like $5 a month, and I might get
Worth
like
it.
5 free text messages. But it's like, I may never use those, but it's the peace of mind that I have this in my vehicle. And if something were to happen and I was in a bad spot, something I can get, even if I'm stuck, even if I'm
Right.
stuck in a
100%.
ditch and I don't want to walk 7 miles to try to get to cell service. Like, this is such a useful tool to be able to have there.
100%. We had I don't know how much time you want on this podcast, but we had an incident where actually my mentor, an older guy in his 50s, we actually got separated because we got hit by this microburst on like the second hunt I've ever went on. And it's funny because, we had this whole plan and everything's in my truck and my pack. And for whatever reason, to this day, he's like, I don't know why I did this. He left everything in the truck and then we got separated. So we're like, holy crap, he ended up spending the night. We all thought he died. Search and rescue came, I called everybody out. We spent the night, we had nods, night vision. And he ended up making it because, one, it was a pretty good storm, so the atmosphere kept the cold not too bad, but it was 40-something degrees, 30-something at night. And moral of the story, don't leave any of your cool guy gear behind.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that comes down to even like where you when you split up gear, like say like this comes down to, again, when we're backpack hunting. I'm thinking back in Colorado this past year when I was hunting there. I ended up getting altitude sickness really bad. And
Oh, did you?
yeah, and I've been there before and never had issues, but anyways, long story short, I ended up having I had some other medical issues that I didn't realize I had going into it, and it made it worse. But when we were going in, it was me and the camera guy, and then the two of my buddies that were hunting. I said, you guys just go in the rest of the way. I'll meet you in there. Well, I never ended up making it in there because my blood oxygen dropped so bad. But when they went in, he had the altitude medication with them in case anything were like that to happen. So they're already in somewhere, and you start splitting up some of these things, and that was it was a minor issue.
Right?
I was able to hike out and be fine, but like still, it comes down to that whole side of the preparedness
Absolutely.
thing. So
Absolutely.
So a couple other things I have here, if you have time to keep rolling here a little bit, but a couple of the other things that I had was, okay, so I mentioned at the beginning, like fuel. So like, what do you think of like bringing extra fuel, or how to do that? Well, yeah, explain that a little bit.
So the way that I run it is probably the most inexpensive way, but also for me, in terms of organization, it works for me. And that is with like a Roto Packs mount. It's outside of the vehicle. It's hard mounted to the rack of my truck. Each container is 4 gallons, so I can carry 8. That's almost half a tank of gas for my truck. And then because it's a proprietary mount for Roto Packs, it'll also mix and match, and I can do water, I can do diesel fuel, I can do a black mount, which is like a toolbox, and I can mix and match moving around. And that's why I like it. I even have it's like a, what do they call it? Dang, I forget the name of it. It's a tailgate option that you can hold a spare tire and another table. It's from Rig. There you go. It's a Rig Supply Ultra Swing, I believe is what it's called. And even that has Roto Packs mounts on it too. So any of those pieces I can move around. They are a little expensive for plastic, but the reason I'm saying they're inexpensive is because the other alternative is to add a whole nother tank.
Yeah.
And fuel up to your rig. That's hard mounted. But I'm all about extending your range. One of the things that we did in Fieldcraft early on is Mike has I forget what gen it is. I want to say it's a 24 valve Cummins diesel, and he added this monster tank on it, and he's like, dude, I get like 1,500 miles on this beat. And I'm like, no, you don't. He's like, I really do. So one of the challenges, and it's on our sources, is he drove from Flagstaff or Prescott, Arizona, north all the way to the Canadian border and back without refueling.
Yeah, I actually watched that because that video. It's been years, I guess, is why I started. I feel like it was in 2019. I just bought a jerry can that I had for putting gas in it, and then another one for water. But like, I was like, my brother, I remember, sent me a video. He's like, you got to see this. And I was like, holy shit.
It's nuts, right?
Yeah.
Even Joe Rogan mentioned it. He's like, yeah, I guess there's an extreme prepper guy who like got this gas tank and all the way to Canada and back. And it's funny because it's really, the whole purpose was to demonstrate why we believe this way in fuel, right? Especially in a crisis, I don't know how many times in the last 2 years, bro, gas stations have struggled or lines are out the door, or even in present day Ukraine. Did you see when everyone was leaving? Some of those people spent 14 hours just trying to get, over
Yeah,
to
stuck in
Poland,
traffic.
stuck in traffic, and they ran out of gas, and then they had to unask their vehicle because it's not there. So 100%, we definitely support adding fuel to your vehicle.
Yeah, I'm gonna have to look at. I've seen those Roto Pack systems, but I haven't looked into them that hard. And like the problem I have with my jerry can is like how to mount it so it stays secure. Like I'd always put it like on like one of those trailer hitch like carriers, and I could nestle it in there and tie it down next to my Yeti on the back or whatever. But it still wasn't perfect.
Like not secure?
Yeah, it
Yeah.
just didn't feel secure, and I just didn't like it. So like I'm always trying to figure out better ways for that.
And that's why I chose Roto Packs. They're not perfect. You do have to burp them every day if you're out in the field or you're
Changing
like
elevation.
I had a girl in like the second mobility course I ever taught a couple years back, and there's a seam for whatever reason. I don't think she was burping them, but her seam cracked. And when we at the end of that course, we were at like meeting at a brewery for the community dinner. And we're like walking through the parking lot, and like this little stream of fuel was just squirting out the back of it. I was like, oh no, that's never happened to me. Which is why, I mean, if you're looking for something that's better, the jerry cans, the metal ones are always better in that sense, but they are limited on the way you can mount them. Roto Packs, you can put them anywhere.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. And okay, so moving along, and one of the things is, and I know on your Gladiator that you run a rooftop tent. I've run a rooftop tent for the last 4 years. Like I'm a big fan of them. Yeah. I love rooftop tents. The how comfortable they are to sleep in. I have a James Brood hard shell on top of mine, and oh my, is it freaking sweet.
Dude, I am with you on that. 100%. Like, there was this one guy. When we used to have a Fieldcraft mobility page, but we consolidated them into I run the big Fieldcraft page on Instagram. And there was this one kid who came on. I mean, he was a young guy, 20s, and he was a Subaru guy. And he was like, you can always tell people who don't overland by the rooftop tent. And I'm like, what? What are you talking about?
Yeah.
The level of comfort that I have in that thing far outweighs whatever opinions you have on me, homie. Like, I have 4 kids, a dog, my wife. All of us are super comfortable no matter the temperature. Big old 3-inch memory foam mattress. Get out of here. I don't need to sleep in the dirt.
Yeah. And you run a Roam? Is that the brand that you have?
Yeah.
Okay. And that's a soft one, right? That's one that flips out. The only thing that I haven't from seeing other people that ran the soft ones was it takes longer to set up and take down but the room, especially if you have a family, would definitely be worth it from that standpoint.
That's the trade-off.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm actually looking for a hard shell now because of that fact. And because since I'm usually more often than not doing some kind of trip, it's just me. But it to each their own, I guess, when it comes to sleep systems. You know what I do too? Like when I go to Easter Jeep Safari here in April and last year, I take it off and I'll use a ground tent, and just make sure I insulate and I'm good when it's just me. But man, I'm a huge fan of rooftop tents, and I am going to look at a hard shell coming up soon.
Yeah, no, so the one that I have, like, it takes like probably 30 seconds to set it up, and then putting it down maybe 3 minutes by myself takes a little bit long. But like for when you're like elk hunting, so you get up, you want to put it down, you want to drive to a spot to head in, like it's quick. It's easy to go. I close everything up and I roll, and that's
done.
It's super nice to be able to have that. And like still like I'll be going bear hunting in Montana here in another month and a half, and like when I go to do that, I'm gonna have some buddies and my brother and stuff there. So I'm gonna set up like a lightweight wall tent, seek outside, makes this one that like, and that's fun for that situation. But like for me, when I'm like by myself or just like moving, or if it's cold out, like that thing keeps me insulated well, and it's super nice to be 100%. Able to have that.
Absolutely.
And then the last thing that I wanted to talk about was like, I think the biggest thing you see, like when you think of off-road vehicles, you think of lift kit and you think of tires. What do you think from a standpoint of a practical, and that term can be used loosely, but like how important is that, and what are your thoughts on those things?
Absolutely. So tires to me, and again, we're referencing that. And this is a perfect kind of way to end the whole conversation too. Tires, that whole cliche, "Oh, where the rubber meets the road," is 100% true in everything that we do. Tires are so important, and tire size. I actually won't make like a definitive stand on tire size because tire size is mission specific, right? If you're a daily driver, you don't need 40s, dude. I mean, it's just, it's ridiculous, right? But if you want to rock crawl, well, then we talk about tire size, right?
Yeah.
When you're planning your rig, my recommendation, and I've been able to be a consultant on a couple of projects, even more recently with, like Jack Carr's doing some stuff with us. The very first thing we sit down and say, from an off-road standpoint, what tire size do you want to wear? Or do you want to run? And the question almost immediately is, well, what do you think? And I'm like, well, what are you trying to do? I don't really have like a dog in the fight when it comes to that. I'm just trying to build around what you're doing. So it's paramount, right? Where the rubber meets the road, where your tires are at, it's going to determine so many different things. If your vehicle can handle it or not, your range even gets affected by them, your performance. The only true lift that you get is from your tires. I mean, you can jack the suspension all the way up. If you're running little donuts, I mean, the rest of your differential or components are still going to be down there, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, they're super important. It just really depends. Am I a Rocklander like me? I'd kind of do a combination of both. Are you an overlander? Are you a weekend warrior? How do you want it to look? All those questions come into play. So in terms of priority, tires to me is the number one when you're looking at it that way.
Yeah, I know, like for like all the hunting trips I've been on, like you can get some really nasty mountain roads, and some of the places that like on my truck currently, I just have I have a 2.5 inch basically leveling kit on it, and then I have a set of 33 inch tires on it, and on a Chevy 1500 platform, and I'd like it to have a little bit bigger tire size on it. I do see a little bit of limitations there, more so that the truck's longer, so you're a lot more apt to bottom out from that standpoint. I haven't found it to be that I haven't found that many limitations to where I've had to go with that. But at the same time, I'd like to be I'd like to have a little bit bigger. And I run a BFG all-terrain KO2.
Oh, nice.
Those tires have just been really good for me from the standpoint of I'm getting 60,000 miles out of them, and they work fairly well in other off-road, and most of my miles come on road, so it's like this balancing act. I'm not going to put a big mud terrain on or something when that's not what most of the uses
you don't need.
Yeah
No, 100% agree. It's interesting because that's part of the reason why I like Jeeps so much, is there's not really anything that compares to it on the market where you can do minimal things. Like I have an EcoDiesel Wrangler that I've just kind of set up in that manner the last 2 months. And, I did a real small 2.5 inch suspension lift, real basic stuff, nothing like coilovers, nothing like that, just coil sprung. And I can fit 37s.
That's crazy.
Underneath that. It's crazy, dude.
Yeah.
It's crazy. So that's part of the reason why, because I knew ahead of time, I want to run a bigger tire and I don't want to change axles. I don't want to worry about strength. And it's set up in that manner where, done. It's got an EcoDiesel. So, originally we're getting something like 24 to 27 MPG. And now it's got 37s. It hits around 20 to 22.
That's pretty awesome.
Which is insane for 37s, so.
Yeah, I'm getting like 12 and a half, 13 out of my Chevy 1500, it's just, that blows my mind that you're able to get that.
That's right.
And what you said there about that's what I love. Gladiators, by the way. I love looking at your vehicle, and just I look at them all the time, and I was like, if I were to get something next, I think I'd be looking at something like that, because it's
awesome.
For how much I use my truck as a truck is very minimal. But that still gives me the ability to kind of do that, but also have so many other functionalities of it, and be able to, and the fact that wheel wells are bigger, and you're able to fit bigger tires on there. I mean, even when I was running a Ram truck, I like the wheel wells were shaped different than the Chevy. So I was able to, with a leveling kit, I was running 35 inch tires on it, and it was perfectly fine. It wasn't binding. I was able to get some more ground clearance, where on a Chevy, you need like almost a 6-inch lift kit to be able to do that without having issues. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Anyways, that's, I love talking about those types of things. So if you had to, the last question is, if you had to say like, all right, here are the top 3 things someone needs to look at from the beginning. You kind of covered that at the beginning of this episode, but just kind of drive the points home for anybody to think about from a preparedness standpoint.
From a preparedness standpoint in mobility, highly recommend a 4-wheel drive to begin with. There is a very famous video that I circulate a lot on our media sources, and it's during it was California fires, and there's a bunch of drivers on the highway that are stuck all in one direction as gridlock, and flames start kind of licking past them, right? The reason why it's so wild is because there's a chain link fence on either side and a small canal with a curb. And the chain link fence, you can just run it over, right? But when you get to the curb, the Priuses were struggling and got stuck. You know, there was a couple Civics that were done, and there's people like passed out from smoke inhalation, right? All easily managed with a 4-wheel drive. And I understand, like, some people are like, I can't afford that. It doesn't make sense. I'm in, New York City or in LA. I get it. But from a preparedness standpoint, 4-wheel drive is there. You can just stay there. It doesn't have to be jacked up. You don't have to go bigger tires. 4-wheel drive is the foundation. After that, focus on the pillars, and I'll reiterate them again: food, water, shelter, comms, mental health, security is the most important, and then recovery. If you're looking at and you're already there, I got a 4-wheel drive, I'm looking to extend my range. What do I need to start out with? Again, it's going to be fire extinguisher, recovery gear, but medical equipment is huge, right? Make sure you go that direction. I mean, it really, really is. It's one of those things that, it's life or death, right?
Yeah.
After that, get out and camp. That's really it. This year, our whole theme is operate the outdoors, and it came from a conversation Mike was having with the Black Rifle Coffee Motorsports team, right? And they're like, well, what do you want to do? What are we focusing on? And Mike's like, bro, we're gonna race. We're gonna jump out of planes. We're gonna be outside. We're gonna go camping. We're gonna go to South Africa. We're gonna go to Mexico. We're doing all these things. And I don't even know who it was. It might have been Matt. He was like, that's like operating the outdoors. And Mike's like, what did you say?
Yeah.
Go outside. Recreation is the test bed. Take your family out. Me being in behavioral health, that speaks to me on a whole spiritual level, bro. Because kids spell love TIME. Take your family out. If you don't have one, take your significant other out. If you don't have anybody, you want to go by yourself, this. When we're out there on the top of a mountain and it's like sunset and all that hippie shit that people make fun of, it's one of the best, right?
Yeah.
It's one of the best experiences you will ever fucking have. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's it. Recreate, go outside, take your vehicle out. If you're not too certain on it, don't go too far, figure out what works. I'm actually doing the same thing. I wasn't raised in motorcycles, and motorcycle is just a step above, a backpack. So I'm doing the same thing. I take my little motorcycle out and figure out what works, what doesn't, learn it. And then you can also, and this is a big thing that we teach in like firearms, is get training. Come to a Fieldcraft survival course. We have all of our information on YouTube, dude. We give away all of our stuff for free. That's what's so funny about it. The courses, the only thing that changes in the courses is you get to work on skills with us while you're there.
Yeah.
But all the information is that this podcast, exactly gave everything that I teach. The only difference is, like when people come in, I actually have them like plug tires and change tires and jump vehicles.
Which is extremely valuable. Which is,
right? Right?
Yeah, that's
so that would be it. Go camp,
man. And that last point there, like, people are probably sick of me saying this on the podcast, but I am so big on investing in yourself, on like training yourself and invest. Like, for me, like, I'm always like, I always invest in like courses online, and that's why I'm building out my own, because I've seen how much value that's brought to me to be able to share that with others. But like being able to invest in, whether it's hunting or if it's, I've done a lot for business, and I've done it, as far as preparedness and mobility, and like, I'm definitely going to look to come to one of the Fieldcraft survival courses. I was just talking to my buddy Kip Folks, and he was telling me that he went to a couple of them now, and and he was telling me he went went to one gunfighting one in New York and was like kind of explaining that. And I'm like, those types of things are so cool. But the cheapest way for anything like you were saying is just spend time outside and learn some of it for yourself and get to do that. But anyways, Mike, thank you so much, man.
No, man.
Let everybody know where they can find more from you and
For me?
and Fieldcraft Survival and everything. Throw it out.
Absolutely. So I'm pretty active on Instagram. My name is mike.a.hernandez. And it's the same on YouTube, only there's no periods or dots. It's just Mike A. Hernandez. Those two sources is what I try to be pretty consistent. And I can say I've been pretty consistent on those ones. The company page, though, fieldcraftsurvival.com is the website. All of our products on there, they're all super rad. It's really cool seeing them develop over the years, especially at where we're at right now. The Fieldcraft Survival channel is also our YouTube. Make sure I'm sure everybody knows who Glover is. He's pretty influential and popular, but mike.a.glover is our fearless leader, and he's just a wealth of knowledge. So any of those sources, I'm pretty interactive too. So if you find me on there and send me a DM or whatever, I'll be all over it to communicate.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, again, thanks for coming on, Mike. I greatly appreciate it.
No, pleasure, man. Seriously. Thanks for having me.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of East Meets West Hunt with your host, Beau Martonik. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit eastmeetswesthunt.com, Facebook at East Meets West Outdoors, and Instagram at East Meets West Hunt. If you enjoyed today's episode, please review and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time.